of the second Great Depression. And let me say, very frankly, I believe that we are in a depression, at least in America, but I believe it is spreading globally. Mm. You know what they say, we sneeze, the rest of the world catches a cold. I hate to say it, but there's some truth to that.
Yeah.
And so,
can I say, you mentioned the word depression there. We've all been talking about recession, and we've all been told that we're just coming out of recession. Some say we never went in it, but those that are honest, they said we come out. What's the difference between a depression and a recession? And do you think we're in a depression rather than a recession?
Well, for starters, recession is a politically correct term, and depression is a politically incorrect term. You have to understand, our government, our Fed, Wall Street, the Treasury, nobody will acknowledge that we're in a depression. A recession is a short-term period of business contraction, liquidation, bankruptcies, and so forth. A depression is simply one of much, much greater magnitude. And a real depression, from the peak to the trough, there will be about a total of a 10% decline in the total GDP. Well, we believe that this is, in fact, a depression. Now, first of all, definition of terms. Inflation is just an expansion of the monetary base. It's the politicians running the printing presses. And as they expand currency and credit, they're diluting the money supply. It waters down the money supply, pushes prices up. That's where inflation. Inflation is always caused by governments. It's caused by governments and central banks running the printing presses too fast. Deflation is a contraction of the money supply. It's a complete contraction of currency and credit, but that's not what we've got right now. Our Federal Reserve in the last 12 months has increased the monetary base in the United States by 129%. This is huge. Yeah. This is huge. So that's inflation, deflation. Okay, we had a deflationary depression during the Great Depression, but our central bank, the Fed, came along and they said, well, never again. We won't let that happen again. Next time we get into something that looks like that, we'll just run the printing presses faster and faster. In fact, the head of our central bank, Ben Bernanke, he's famous for saying, hey, we have a secret weapon. It's called the printing press. We'll just unleash it on the world when we need to. And so they said, we will print our way out of every recession that comes. So since the war, everything has been inflationary recessions. Now, this one is deeper than anything we've seen since the Great Depression, and I think you can very clearly say this is a depression we are in the United States and in many, maybe not all, but many parts of the world. Asia, I think, is faring a little better than the West. Okay? But at some point, this may actually turn into a roaring deflationary depression that they're about to lose control of. And then as they run the printing presses faster and faster and faster, all of a sudden, people begin to say, wow, we've just seen the United States government and Fed commit $13 trillion to trying to bail out the U.S. economy since September of 2007. That's a good number, $13 trillion. Wow. We hold trillions of dollars. Ooh, we don't think we want to hold those anymore. And so people start getting out of their dollars and they try to unload their dollars. And then the Americans say, oh, wow, I don't think I want to stay in dollars either. And overnight, you can have a deflationary depression morph into an inflationary depression and then a hyperinflation. Right. I believe that there's the potential, because of the massive expansion of U.S. dollars. The U.S. dollar is the world's reserve currency. Okay, never in history have you seen the world's reserve currency inflated to the extent that ours is. So at some point, what is a depression today? And some people would argue a deflationary depression. I would argue it's really an inflationary depression at this point. It could morph into a superinflation or a hyperinflation, and that would be catastrophic because everybody all over the world holds $13 trillion in U.S. dollar obligations.
So, I mean, basically, the American government still, I mean, people say America's losing its influence in that, but really the economy is so big and so vast, and the dollar is still looked upon, so, you know, by many. What happens there is going to affect the rest of the world, isn't it? It's like this domino effect. Have any of the policies of President Obama or anything like that, has that sought in any way to bring this under control, or is he, you know, developing it even more?
It's getting worse. I don't think there's a lot of difference between the Republicans and the Democrats, and frankly, I think there's kind of this unity between Wall Street, our Treasury, and the Fed. I call them triplets or Siamese triplets who are joined at the hip. And no, we are still printing money like there was no tomorrow since President Obama came in. President Obama was clearly favored by Wall Street. They supported him 7-1 in financial contributions over Mr. McCain, Senator McCain, who was a Republican. So, no, unfortunately, what we're seeing is talk of higher taxes. It's suicidal to raise taxes in the middle of a recession or a depression. I know that your government just did,
yes.
But what can I say? That's your problem. But we're facing the same problem in our country too.
Yeah.
They're talking about raising taxes. They're spending more and more money. They're talking about humongous government programs. They're talking about a national health care program that'll cost $2.5 trillion for starters. So it's some people in America believe that the inmates really have taken over the asylum, and it's a problem. Nothing that is being done is going to halt the recession. Everything that is being done by our government today is actually poison to the U.S. economy. And unfortunately, if it's poison to the U.S. economy, then it begins to spread all over the world.
Interesting. I mean, just a question here because it's come in. Hi, Doug. Your guest keeps referring to the Federal Reserve as our Fed. I understood that it's actually a privately owned entity. Can you ask him about this?
I wish I were a shareholder in the Fed so I could truly say his point is well taken. It is a privately held institution. It's a central bank. It was set up supposedly into law, although it was never really legally ratified in 1913, and it became the engine for inflation in the United States. And if we had one of my PowerPoint presentations here, I could show you the chart of how we had 200 years of flat inflation, and when the Fed came in, the inflation started going like this, and it's absolutely never stopped. So it is a private bank that is very much staffed by people from Wall Street. And so the Fed, as I said, there is this incestuous relationship between the Fed, the U.S. Treasury, and Wall Street. And it's just kind of like a revolving door. And these people, what they do are for their interests. Point in case, we had a $720 billion and a $778 billion in bailout programs,
yes,
stimulus programs, and so forth. The majority of those funds for the bailout went to 2% of the large financial institutions in America, which are on Wall Street, the Goldman Sachs and the Morgan Stanleys and the J.P. Morgan Chase and so forth, went to a tiny little sliver of these people who have all this tremendous influence on Wall Street. The other 98% of the banks and the people across the economy, they got absolutely nothing. There is a massive uproar in the United States today because they realize that so much of that money went into the corporate coffers and went into huge bonuses for these people, and we're making $1 million bonuses off of taxpayer money.
Yeah.
Actually, they didn't tax us for it; they just printed the money. It's just a big mess.
I mean, we have the same anger here, of course, because probably not in quite the same large figures as that. But again, we had the bank bailout, and again, those people that are giving themselves big bonuses, and the government seems unable to really be able to do this. I mean, you used the word earlier on greed. It seems to me that if at the heart of our economies the people are greedy, is there any hope? I mean, okay, we're talking about the biblical side of God stepping in and possibly doing something in a bit. But from the human point of view, if these people are so tied up with this and so determined to have this for themselves, is there any hope that we can get out of where we are at the moment?
I don't think it's the people that's greedy, but it certainly is our financial and our political leaders. And as I said before, it's kind of an incestuous relationship between them. I don't believe there's hope until the system breaks down. Lenin used to say, not one of my heroes, but a bright guy, he used to say worse is better. And I think as the financial system actually gets worse, and the whole machinery begins to break down, I think at that point we may have a chance for things to get better, but I truly believe things are going to get worse before they get better. And let me add this thought, Doug, because some of our listeners are probably saying tonight, is this guy crazy? Is he daft? I mean,